shall begin this part. Actually, before we should begin with the lineage prayer that we were chanting yesterday. So if you have the red book, the Phowa text here. So on page 61. So the translation here, the gist of this, it says, I supplicate, it begins with, I supplicate Pema Sambhava of Udiyana. Remember, he was the origin, according to this tradition, of this practice. As in, there was a minister who lost 12 members of his family to a fire that he accidentally started. And then in great distress, he went to Pema Sambhava and asked for how he could help them. Pema Sambhava, according to the story, went to the Pure Land of Amitabha, received this from Buddha Amitabha, and then Pema Sambhava came back and taught this to that minister. But it said that then this practice was concealed for a few hundred years until a later point. It was revealed as a treasure text, as a dharma. So the next name here, so this prayer is basically, it says, I supplicate Pema Sambhava of Udiyana. Then if you go look at on 62, it says, I supplicate Tertun Nidasanje. So Tertun Nidasanje is the person who several centuries later, he retrieved this. It said that he discovered this text from a lake, I think in maybe southern Tibet area. He discovered it from a lake. And then he gave it to, the next in line is Namka Gyaltsen, then to Sangha Bhadra, Pago Drumelodo, Dharma Lord Sanjay Gyaltsen, Mati Senchen, and so on and so forth, up until to our times. And so this is the lineage. As I said yesterday, when we do this supplication, it's not limited to these people, these specific names. And know that each generation, many will also practice this. And understand the whole idea of supplicating the lineage, invoking the blessings of the lineage. So we talked about this yesterday. So that, yes, if you know about these individuals specifically, their stories, their history, it might help inspire. Some of you have this book, Masters of the Golden Lineage, and some of the names, especially the later names, are names of throne holders of the Gyugunkage. Then they are in that book. But if they were not throne holders, official heads of the lineage, they're not going to be in that book. You can learn some things about them. But again, without knowing the specifics about these individuals, more important is to understand that they practiced this and they achieved success and they have passed this down to us, and then we're invoking all of that. So page 61. So then it says, I supplicate Pema Sambhava of Udiyana, grant your blessings for the realization of the profound path of Phowa. Grant your blessings for reaching the celestial realm by the swift path of Phowa. Grant your blessings so that at the time of death, I and others attain rebirth in Sukhavati through Phowa. Homage to limitless light, Buddha. Again, Bema Junela Sovade Sablam Phowa Jompar Jinjilo Nirlam Phowe Kacho Droba Jinjilo Daso Dine Tsepo Yurmata Dewa Chindu Kewa Jinjilo Sangye Hopa Mela Chaseo Terto Nida Sangye La Sovade Tome Namka Gyatsen La Sovade Toden Sangha Bhadra La Sovade Ago Drime Lodro La Sovade Choje Sangye Gyatsen La Sovade Tsume Mati Senchen La Sovade Yongjin Punso Namgye La Sovade Kenchen Namjong Punso La Sovade Jesun Kunjo Rana La Sovade Ringsen Choki Drakpa La Sovade Kunjo Trinle Namgye La Sovade Kunjo Trinle Sampo La Sovade Trinle Dundru Chogya La Sovade Kunjo Tenzin Lodru La Sovade Yongzin Choki Gyotsen La Sovade Tenzin Choki Nima La Sovade Kyabda Deme Gyotsen La Sovade Jesen Dharma Dwatsa La Sovade Garchen Chanchu Wangpo La Sovade Trinchen Lodro Gyotsen La Sovade Rinchen Tempe Zegyen La Sovade Kunjo Tulje Nima La Sovade Lodro Choyan Lodro La Sovade Uryen Nuden Dorje La Sovade Jesun Kunjo Chogya La Sovade Tenzin Choki Lodro La Sovade Tuten Shive Lodro La Sovade Tenzin Choki Jonne La Sovade Trinchen Tsawe Lama La Sovade Zalam Phowa Jompar Jinjilo Nirlam Phowe Kacho Dropa Jinjilo Daso Dine Tsepo Gyurmata Dewa Chindu Kirwa Jinjilo Sanje Hopa Mela Chaseso distracting. You have to check the frame. Before break, I said now we're going to look at from the Lojong tradition. When they talk about Phowa, what are they referring to? Because these are the actual, I would say, essence of what we're talking about. Beyond techniques, beyond meditation techniques, beyond methods. Essence of what we're talking about is the type of things that we need to focus on working on again and again and again and again. To that degree, when we know the essence, at least right now, to know the essence of what we're talking about is to know conceptually. But without at least those concepts, then you say practice. What are you practicing? I just want to practice. Sometimes you hear people saying that. What are you practicing? Vague. What is the essence? Vague. Can't even conceptually kind of figure that out. But with regards to the essence of what we're talking about, the essence of what we say we're practicing, we need to know. Yeah. So now let's look at this in the Lojong tradition. So the Lojong in 7 points is a very well-known text. Lojong, L-O-J-O-N-G, Lojong in 7 points. This is a very famous text. So if you Google this, it's going to pull up very quickly. This was composed by this great master called Geshe Chekawa. Geshe Chekawa. So Geshe Chekawa summarized the points for mind training into 7 topics, basically. 7 points. And then within each point, there are things to be elaborated. Point number 4 is the point called how to incorporate, how to kind of like summarize everything that one needs to do according to this set of instructions. If we look at it from the expanse of like in one's lifetime. So in one's lifetime, it would be like from birth and well until whenever you can learn how to talk and understand what people are saying, right? From that point up until the point of you're actively dying until death. So in one lifetime, these are all the stages, right? First, as a kid, as a baby, you're relearning, we would say, how to interact, how to understand others. Now, then you finally learn that, and then you're alive, and then until you're actively dying, until you're dead. So this whole expanse. So here, point number 4 of this Lojong 7 points is to say, if we look at the question of when we say practice, what are we practicing? It says, well, you can summarize it with practicing gaining these 5 powers. So within this 4th point, there are 2 statements. It says, the essence of the epitome of the pith instructions is to apply the 5 powers. That's one statement under this point. The pith instructions, meaning if we essentialize everything, how do we summarize? Is to apply the 5 powers. Then the next statement is the Mahayana instructions for dying. Here it actually, the word is Phowa. The Mahayana instructions for going. That means going from this to the next life. The Mahayana instructions for transitioning from this to the next life are also the 5 powers, which has to be put, kind of like, which has to be engaged at the time when you are actively dying. That's the second statement. So before we look at the second statement, first we need to see, right, the statement about throughout your life, these are the 5 powers you have to apply. What are the 5 powers? The first one is called the power of, one translation is, let's see, the power or the strength of compulsion or force. So here is talking about to strongly determine, to be determined, to be compulsion in the sense of almost like a force, being forced. But of course we're not talking about being forced by anyone. Like you need to have this power of the compelling power, which is to strongly say, you know, I will never be separated from the training in the two bodhicittas. In the Lojong tradition, it's expressed like that. Relative bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Relative bodhicitta is the compassion aspect. Ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom aspect. To never be separated from these two aspects. The rest of the Lojong, like the point number 2, actually gives the specific meditation and post-meditation practices for both ultimate bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. So you have to learn that from elsewhere. We don't have time today. Otherwise the whole program will turn into the 7-point Lojong. Yeah? But suffice to say that it says the first power is this force provided from, committed to the two trainings. Second is the power of familiarization, which is to train again and again. So first is sort of like to make the determination. Second is to habituate, to get into the habit of always practicing. Both the meditation practices of the two bodhicittas and the post-meditation practice. Meditation practice is formal practice. Sit down on a cushion, train in the following way, meditate in the following way. Post-meditation, when you get up from the cushion, when you go about your life, you cannot like check out. You have to, as much as you can, let this inform, right? What you have been training, let it inform the way you're going to relate to things, the way you're going to relate to what you're seeing around you, the way you're going to relate to your experiences around you. But this is not to be done, you know, in kind of like this way that you are, again, you know, triggered. Even that is not very helpful. Like, I don't generally encourage people to walk around thinking about death. Often we get it wrong if you do it that way. But to have things that, you know, can kind of like remind you, you know, yeah, look at that. Oh, yeah, look at that. You know, just lightly, you know. You don't want it to become heavy and oppressive. Then something else is going on. And you need to look into it if that's what you're experiencing. If this meditation on the, you know, how samsara is suffering, you know, if this is following you around and you feel like it's a dark cloud following you around, you may need to be a little careful, cautious about that. This is not Dharma working necessarily. Something else, okay? So whether you're here or listening out there, please pay attention to this. And if you walk around feeling like there's a dark cloud over your head or enveloping you all the time, this is not renunciation mind, most likely. Something else is going on, you need to pay attention to that. And then the third is the power of virtuous actions. To do as much, to find opportunities to engage in the power of virtuous actions. The fourth is the power of disenchantment. Another way to say the determination to be disentangled, not to want to be entangled anymore. You see, the way we come up with this determination or commit to this determination of not wanting to be caught, not wanting to be entangled anymore, not wanting to be, hooked in anymore, it has to arise from understanding. It cannot be like you're just forcing yourself to feel that way. Then you're just living up to some sort of ideal that has no real, it's not really coming from an understanding, like, oh no, this is really futile, this is really silly, this is really stupid, I don't want it anymore. It has to come from there, this enchantment. Now we are so enchanted, right, with everything, so we need to be disenchanted. Then the fifth is the power of aspirations. You see how, right, fourth and fifth, they kind of provide each other good balance. One is emphasizing, what I like to say, the realization that samsara sucks. Samsara is just, yuck, right? But then you should not be weighted down by that, so that you become, as I said yesterday, right, incapacitated. No, then it's not working. In fact, when you see that samsara, is really like yuck, right? Then it enhances the power of your aspirations. If it doesn't enhance your power of aspiration, that means you need to work on it more. You need to do something. I'm not saying that the first moment you have disenchantment, your aspirations will become great. But what I am saying is that you need to direct your disenchantment with samsara towards magnifying your aspirations. Your aspirations to, in this case, it's like, wholeheartedly, I'm going to train in the two bodhicittas. Given the unsatisfactory nature, given the faults of business as usual, I'm now going to pull all my energy in the direction of, directed in the direction of training in the two bodhicittas. So these are the 5 powers. Throughout our lives, we rely, it says, on these 5 powers. So whatever word you use for it, here the first one is called the compelling power, the force of your motivation. Second is the power of familiarization, to habituate, to practice, in other words. The third is the power of creating virtue. You have to make an effort to find opportunities to create virtue. It could be mental, it could be verbal, it could be physical. It's not as hard as it sounds. And it doesn't need to be as contrived as it sounds. But it does mean paying attention. Whenever we have the opportunity to create virtue, we should do that. Fourth is renunciation mind or disenchantment, the 4th power. And working hand in hand with that is, the stronger your renunciation, the greater your aspirations have to be. These are the 5 powers. Throughout life we should do this. Then it says, when we apply these 5 powers, which is the next point here, for Phowa, according to this tradition, at the time of death, when we need to transition, when we need to go from here to there. In this tradition, it doesn't specifically talk about Phowa-ing, transitioning, going to Amitabha's pure life. The emphasis is not so much on where you go, except that there's the underlying understanding. You want to go to that good place, right? So here it says, then, with regards to the power of, the order is a little bit different in this commentary that's given. It says, so we can start with the power of sowing, of practicing virtue. And so these are some very practical instructions. It says, once you know, and if you're lucky enough to know that you are now actively dying, then what you should do now in this context, liquidate. Everything that you own, start giving them away. Start giving them away. Offer them for the enjoyment of others, for the sustenance of others. Give them away. It's better to give them away than to have them yanked away from you, which is what happens at death. If you don't give them away before you die, you will be rudely, painfully pulled away from your stuff. So start giving them away when active dying, and put things in place to give them away. Now this is important. When you give them away, really give them away. Don't try to control how the other person is going to be using them. Of course, if your parents are giving to your child and all of that, and you might, realistically, you think about, he's going to squander it away, and you do what you can, and then after that, at a certain point, you give them. You cannot control that anymore. But also, it's very complicated these days to give. You say, so yes, think a little bit about that. Don't think too much about that. Beyond that, give them away. Power of aspiration. Here it says, here you need to make prayers to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the awakened beings, and say, as I enter this stage, let me remain committed to the two bodhicittas. And even as things are going to get more difficult, let me not waver, never waver away from. And with your help, with your inspiration, with your blessings, with your guidance, let me not stray away from the practice of the two bodhicittas. So in this context, we can say, as once this active dying has begun, we need to pray. If you're doing the Phowas, that Phowas to Amitabha's Pure Land, then pray to supplicate Amitabha. Right? The third is then with regards to disenchantment. So here then specifically you need to look at this loss of this body. This body means life, the loss of this life. So then you can begin now to see how, this is a burden, especially now. And so don't let your sense of who you are be tethered to this life, this body. Strengthen that part as active dying has begun. Strengthen that part and say, this is not who I am. But instead, this have so long become the basis for self-cherishing. That this pet demon that I have been, keeping, and which has caused so much headache and havoc in my life. Now is the time to let go of it. And this pet demon is present largely through the existence of this. Or, the existence of this in of itself doesn't cause it, but it serves as a powerful impetus for our self-grasping to arise. So this is all about, using what is at hand, using what is going on to enhance your. This is not like something that you blindly apply throughout. If you're well and alive, then the focus should be, I am well and alive. I have this strong body. Hallelujah. I'm going to use this strong body to practice the two bodhicittas. Now this strong body is no longer strong. In fact, as you lay there dying, it's like really. Then instead of like, I want back strong body, I want back my strong body. It's like, actually this Okay, serve me well already to the extent that they serve me well. Now, that's it, ta-ta. Yeah. So that kind of disenchantment. Then this compelling power is to, same like the aspiration, but here you double down on, like, no matter what, the two bodhicittas is my method. Now this is in the context of Lojong. Now if we apply these 5 powers in the context of the more regular Phowa that people know about, using the central channel, the particular object that you meditate on, and using the sound, using visualization, all of that. That is when you think, now I need to really forcefully use that. So these 5 powers, can be applied to the particular Phowa technique that you're relying on at the time of actively dying. Then the power of familiarization, and that, in the context of Lojong, it talks about first, you need to continue to train Lojong in the training of the 2 bodhicittas, training in wisdom and training in compassion. And then it has its own kind of advice given, like the optimal kind of physical position to be in as you are dying, and so on and so forth. But in this Phowa that we do, we say now is the time to do Phowa. And so how it does is that if you have someone who does this practice, knows this practice as you are dying, then you rely on them. Remember the Amitabha society I was talking about in ancient China? Yeah, so having like an equivalent society or Phowa society, the idea is that then people can sit with you and practice and remind you. Now we do this, now we do this. And so then the actual formal practice, which, if you have been practicing all along, this will be what you need to mostly focus on at this point. So these are the 5 powers. And so the power of, if you put the order, the power of being compelling forcefully, the power of virtuous actions, the power of disenchantment, of renunciation, the power of aspiration, and then the power of familiarization, which is practice. What we call practice is to familiarize, to habituate. So this is the way that the Lojong tradition talks about the transition, which is Phowa, which means when you go from here to there. Questions?
These the 5 powers: faith, perseverance.
This is the, sorry?
Are these the same?
No, it's different from yesterday's 5 powers.
Okay.
Yeah. Yesterday's 5 power. Faith or conviction, right? That's one. Second one is joyful effort, perseverance. Third is sati, attention, awareness. Fourth is meditative concentration. And fifth is wisdom. Those are the 5. And in that one too, there is a certain progression. Start with conviction, but you don't quite graduate from conviction. You start with conviction. With enough conviction, right? Then you put in effort. And the effort should be directed at what? At attention and awareness. Attention and awareness then should strengthen into meditative stabilization, which is samadhi, the 4th. And this meditative stabilization should result in wisdom. That's the more common 5 powers. This Lojong, when they talk about the 5 forces or the 5 powers, is specific to this text, this Lojong text. The other one is quite universal. You find that list in Theravada, in East Asian Buddhism, in Tibetan Buddhism.
How does it relate to the paramitas?
Doesn't.
It doesn't.
There are many, many different lists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But some of the terms are the same?
Yeah, some of the terms are the same.
So
Yeah.
what was number 5?
Wisdom.
Wisdom, okay.
So these are from the Lojong tradition. All that we've been talking about so far, to clarify, and a question earlier that someone was asking, is these are things that we apply to ourselves, you know. We have not talked yet, you know, how you help other people to die. Not yet. Yeah, that we'll come to that. Now, you first have to understand, you know, how you need to train. So, self-care first. I said the fifth instruction of that is like whenever you fly, they tell you that. First, put the mask, oxygen mask on yourself, and then help others. You know, if you can't do that, then you can't help others. So, again, beyond or moving away from understanding of Phowa in a very limited way, again, to that particular technique, to that particular form of meditation. Remember, Phowa is the question of where are you going to go after this? Then once you ask where you're going to go, if you know the answer, where you want to go, then how are you going to get there? And that's when we get to the different methods. Right? And so there can be many different methods. So many ways of going, many ways of Phowaing, many ways of going, many ways of Phowaing. So in one list that is very popular, very well known, they say there are 5 types of Phowa. But today I'm not going to go over 5 types of Phowa. I just want to show you that there are many different ways of going. Now, we can all agree that where we want to go is we want to go to the best place we can go to. The best place we can go to. Well, it's one thing that, you know, it's one thing to say, you know, I want to go to blah, blah, blah. It's another thing, you know, whether you can go or not. But now, while things are relatively in control, while relative leisure and endowments are present, you have to work on it. You have to make the plans. You have to work on it wherever it is that you want to go. But fundamentally, this going business is about, if we take it in this context of actual death, right? It's about then, where do we go? How do we go? How do we go is related to where we are going. Meaning, the state of mind as we are exiting this life does determine where we will end up at. So in Buddhist texts, outside the context of Phowa teachings, elsewhere, there's a lot of discussion about the importance of that last moment, or at least those last moments of this life. Then generally the principle is that, well, those moments will be largely determined by your whole life. Just as we say, you know, commonly, right? Even outside the context of Phowa or outside the context of Buddhism, you know, they say, as you are dying, right, your whole life will flash in front of you. This report, right? Maybe not like exactly like a movie, but all the highlights, all come at you, right? So those last moments, they say, is really important. So according to this, the best is if we know how to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. That we say is the best. But there are second best, third best, fourth best, fifth best, sixth best. Just don't end up at Best Buy. So this we need to know. Like, so when it's time to go, where and how do we go? To be prepared for that. And yesterday I said how when we know that, when we know how to go, now, then we settle a lot of our stresses and concerns and fears. So in working on that seemingly future event, we're actually working on now. And in working on now, we're working on, so it's interdependent. You cannot just plan to name all your kids after Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and then think at the last moment, of course I'll be saying the names of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, except that those names have turned into family squabble. So it won't work that way. So in one, yesterday I said I'm going to share with you, in the collected works of Kyopa Jiten Sungmin, founder of Drigum Kagyu, there's one, and his collected works in 12 volumes. Within that, there's one collection called the Public Teachings. Public, in the sense of, it wasn't given to this person or that person specifically. It was given, addressed to the assembly, the gathering. So they call it the public teachings. In a sense, you can understand what public means. And to me, what that also means is like this applies generally, without needing to know much about the circumstance of who he's talking to. We can gain a general understanding of this is a general but important fundamental principle that everybody should understand. So in there he says he addresses his monks. He said, some of you at some point will be called to go assist someone as they're dying. And some of you will be asked in that context to assist someone who is dying that you know is probably not going to be going to a very good place. It's also, to me, also you need to understand this is a sign of his times. People were fighting, going to war. So the example he gives is actually a young person whom someone has asked you to go assist someone young, dying, and perhaps they have been involved in warfare, or is a bandit, have done a lot of negative things. And he says, you might hesitate. And this account doesn't say hesitate for what reasons, but you can think, all sorts of reasons you might hesitate. He said, anyway, he says, you should go help. You should go help. And you might think, oh gosh, how am I going to do effective Phowa for this person? And he says, this is how you do it. And basically, he says, you appeal to this person's ability to love. So Kyopa Jiten Sungmin says, you as you assist this dying person whom you know have committed a lot of negative. So this is like that question, earlier that you asked. Yeah? But if you are, at the point of assisting someone who's dying, you don't read that section, You don't read the Abhaya Sutta to them anymore, Wrong place, wrong time. Alright? Here you have to take this other approach that Judaism recommends. He says, you go there, you comfort them. After comforting them, you appeal to their ability to love. Even if it's partial love. So he said, you say to this person, you might think everything. You understandably are thinking of yourself now, and understandably you're thinking of yourself now. Maybe with fear, or maybe depending on the circumstance. But you direct their attention to and say, but think about your mother and her kindness to you. So then this softens this person's heart. And so even if this person has a lot of hate right now, maybe an enemy like injured him, mortal injury. The point is you direct them away from hatred. You direct them away from hatred, you direct them away from resentment, you direct them away from pain even. Do what you can to appeal to them to generate love and care. And say, think about it. So you find ways to help this person think about that. And then Judaism says to his monks, obviously, I'm sure his monks are like, but this doesn't take them to the Buddha's Pure Land. So he answers it. He says, yes, it doesn't take them to the Pure Land. No. But it will take them to a better place.
Get them out of hell.
Yeah, get them out of hell. And he says, it will take them to the Brahma realms. Brahma realms are the realms of the radiant gods. In one of the Brahma realms, it says you reach there by meditating on love. Partial love, but it says you can. And he says, it's not bad if they are born in the Brahma realms, because then in the Brahma realms, they can generate, they can change. He says, yeah, sure. He said this. Yeah, sure. They don't go to Amitabha's Pure Land because at that moment they're not capable of going to Amitabha. You just find ways to take them away from the hell realms, out of the anger, resentment, even regret, if they have a lot of regret. But if that regret is not redirected, now if that regret can be redirected to, okay, now that you recognize, right, all the negative things that you have done, but you know what, now what do? Aspirations, right? So they have a lot of regret related to disenchantment. You could say a form of disenchantment. Don't let them leave like that. Now you say, you can aspire to do better. You can get to a better place where you can change. Everything is possible. Every moment. One of the lessons. So elsewhere in the discussion of the Vajra statement, those of you who know this material, Gongchi, Kyoba Judaism's most distinctive teachings is collected in this collection called the Gongchi, single intention. In one of the Vajra statements, it says something along the lines of, let me see, I better look for it rather than mangle it. It says, the line says, let's see. phenomena are the embodiments of momentary thoughts. This line is really important. All phenomena, all experiences, all that we consider to be our reality, he says every single instance of what we experience, right? Every scenario, every situation that we find ourselves in, all phenomena, they are embodiments of momentary thoughts. And here, the commentary says, he is responding to what's the view that he's trying to correct. This is very interesting. It says that he's trying to correct the view that some people have that always thinks that karma the workings of karma, cause and effect, is something that takes place over long periods of time. Like you say, oh, you're like this because so much karma from so many lifetimes, and therefore you're like this. Which is, that is, what we do say, right? What you are now, is so much of from the past, right? Many, many lifetimes, 72 lifetimes back, 72,000 lifetimes back, all of that. But at the same time, Jigten Sungkyun says, but also know that actually, in actual fact, every moment right now that you are experiencing as your reality, it's simply the embodiment of momentary mind. What does that mean?
72,000 lifetimes of moments.
No.
But you can change really rapidly.
You can change really rapidly. Even 72,000 lifetimes ago, some karma that was planted that is ripening now, it's still the embodiment of rapidly changing. So you can powerfully change that in that moment. Yes, karma is inexorable. We have said that, right? Yesterday, or in the teaching with the Peruvians, that question came up. Karma is inexorable, we say, unmistaken. But karma also, we understand karma to be inexorable in the context of everything that we experience right now. They are the embodiments. And they are the fruition. They are the coming together of momentary thoughts. So momentarily, you can also change it. Yes?
Is there a distinction you're making between what you're perceiving of your situations or phenomena and what your habits are in terms of the duration of karma that is informing either your habits or what you're perceiving?
And therefore, if I make a distinction, what does that imply if I don't make a distinction? I'm just trying to...
What could be changed on the spot?
Everything. Yeah. So there's no predestination. There's a predisposition of habits, for sure. There's a predisposition. So that's the one aspect of cause and effect that is often emphasized. But sometimes cause and effect, people take it as if, it's like fixed, nothing I can do. No. Everything is momentary. Everything is momentary. Great opportunity, arises if we can see. So elsewhere also, so based on that story of Jigten Sungkyun, telling his monks, you know, if you're called upon to assist someone, you know. So we will say, you know, no, now is not the time to talk about, oh, your karma is very heavy, oh, no. Because we really, you know, we don't relate to karma like, you know, this is God's justice, you know, like God's rule you have broken, you know. This is not about law. This is about helping. So you help them like that. Elsewhere, they elaborate on this and they say, really, you know, if you try to like help or benefit someone who has heavy karma, you cannot do it through fear. You cannot try to scare them. When they are well and healthy, you can put in some fear of God or fear of karma into them. But when someone is, you know, weak and fearful, that's when you find, you try to figure out. It says, what would motivate this person to see the possibility of freedom, even as they are so oppressed by their own afflictive emotions? You find what can help. And that, it says, is a very important point for Phowa. In the more general sense, Phowa. Yeah. Some time back I shared with you, I said, you know, I saw, I think it's Outlander, that series. Right? It's just the one with the woman that got time transferred, right? Time travel accidentally. But it's not like modern to ancient. It's, you know, 100 years ago back to like 300 years ago, something like that. Anyway, she First World War, I think. Yeah, First World War. She was a nurse, so that's the setting. And then she accidentally like entered into several hundred years back, and this is all unfolding like in Scotland thereabouts. So she got transferred back, and she had been a nurse doctor during the First World War, so she has a lot of medical knowledge. Also, she has seen a lot of people dying in the battleground. So she got time travel back to a point where the Scots were fighting the English.
1700s, I'm watching it.
Yeah, 1700s, and so of course the people that she was with, you know, she's English, and she ended up with the Scots and a band of them, and someone was dying, and she came to do Phowa, essentially. That was when about the same time I was reading that public teaching of Jilin Sungye, and then I watched that episode. I was like, that is